Hi everybody, my name is Jennifer Lang and I'm here to tell you about some of the basic parts of the violin and the bow. Especially if you're just beginning, it's really good to know your way around the violin. So I've got my violin here. It's a full-size violin, and depending on how big you are, how tall you are, how long your arms are, you may have a smaller violin. Violins can be as small as a 16th for very, very small kids, to a quarter, to an eighth, to a half size, all the way up to a full size, which is what most adults will play. Okay, now when you look at the violin, you can kind of think of it as a helpful analogy as a person. You know, it's got a head, it's got shoulders, and a body. And actually, we use the term body a lot to talk about the violin. This is the body of the instrument. And we do refer to these as the shoulders. Now, this head part that I mentioned is actually called in violin terminology the scroll. It sounds a little bit like the word squirrel, but instead it's scroll with an O, and that's spelled S-C-R-O-L-L. And they can have all different kinds of designs, and some of them are very ornate, especially in the Baroque period of classical music, which was about 300, 400 years ago. Some of the instrument makers made very, very elaborate scrolls. So this is usually what a scroll looks like a scroll of paper rolled up. Then here we have these black pegs, is what they're called. And these help us tune the different strings. And each peg is attached to a different string. So this peg right here is for my G string. This peg right here is for my D string. This peg right here on the top, A string, and this peg right here, E string. So we usually use these when our strings are a little bit flat or sharp, and we turn them up to get the string pitch to sound higher, and we turn them down to get the string pitch to sound lower. And I'll have more videos on tuning later. Okay, so then we have the strings. And I mentioned I have the lowest string, the next highest, all the way up to the highest. There are 4 strings. They're tuned in fifths. So we have G, and then we have D, excuse me, that D, and then we have A, and then we have Okay, so I go from lowest to highest. And if you actually look at your strings, you'll notice that the thickest string is the lowest one. And that's because low sounds have longer sound waves, and you need a thicker string for those longer sound waves to travel through. Okay, so we're making our way down. These are the shoulders. And then here, actually, this long black piece that the strings are going over is just simply called the fingerboard. And that's very easy to remember because we put our fingers there, excuse me, to make different pitches. Fingerboard. And then as we come down here, we have this thin wooden piece, and this is the bridge. And it makes sense because the strings go over it. And so that's the bridge. And this piece, believe it or not, is actually not glued to your violin. And what keeps it there is the pressure of the strings. So if your strings loosen by accident, which can happen when weather changes a lot, I don't know if any of you have had the experience of opening up your violin and all of the strings are super loose because it got really cold or really hot outside. And then in that case, sometimes the bridge will actually fall over. And that can be fixed. You can bring your violin to a local instrument repair shop. A luthier is what we call them, or just a violin shop, and they can put your bridge back in place. And the bridge is very important. The sound vibrates through the bridge to produce sound, along with inside the instrument is a little sound post about this big, and it's just about right underneath the bridge inside the violin. And so the communication between that little sound post and the bridge is very important for the projection of sound. And then we have These are what we call the F holes, and that's because they're shaped like a cursive F. And these are very important too for the sound to project out of. Okay, we're making our way down the instrument, and here we have our tailpiece. And mine is a little covered up because I've got my chin rest here, but the tailpiece goes like this, and it makes a little tail, and that's how you can remember it's called the tailpiece. And here usually there are 4 holes, you can see here, for the fine tuners. And typically when you get to be an advanced player, you only have 1 fine tuner, and you can make the rest of your tuning adjustments with the pegs. So I have 1 fine tuner, and usually that would be on the E string. And this is to make very fine adjustments. The larger adjustments for pitch would be here, like if your violin is more than like a quarter tone or half tone, half step off, then you would adjust here. But if it's like less than a quarter tone or 1/8 tone, you can kind of just adjust here. And then of course the chin rest. And these can be all different sizes and shapes. They can be smaller, they can be taller. Mine is kind of medium. You can see it's about 1 inch or so tall. Some people have taller ones if they have more space between their chin and their shoulder. And they can be made out of plastic, out of wood. I've chosen to put mine in the center because that for me is a better placement. Now, many of you may not know, but if you look inside your violin through those F holes and you kind of get the right tilt on your violin, you can look inside and there will be a label, and it'll say where your violin was made and what year. And that can be pretty interesting information to find out. So those are the basic parts of the violin. I could go into a lot more detail and talk about the different ribs and layers, but I'm not an instrument maker, so I'll leave that to somebody with more expertise in that. And one more obvious part I forgot is this is the neck of the violin. So you can think that that attaches the head or the scroll with the shoulders, just like the human body. The head, the shoulders, and in between there's a neck. So this is the neck of the violin. And where these pegs are, like this little area that's not the scroll, that's the peg box. Okay, hopefully I haven't forgotten anything, and hopefully this was really informative about the different parts of the violin. Tune in for the next video.